You're listening to Imperfect Heroes, Insights into Parenting, the perfect podcast for imperfect parents looking to find joy in their experience of raising children in an imperfect world. And I'm your host, DJ Stutz. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for choosing to spend the next few minutes here with us at Imperfect Heroes, Insights into Parenting. And today, we have started this new year. We've got kind of this underlying theme for throughout the year on how kids develop morally. But today we're going to be talking about entrepreneurship and teaching our kids about entrepreneurship, encouraging them when they are interested in that. And I have this amazing guest, Margot Machol-Bisnow, and she has done so much research and she's done interviews and it's just amazing, and we'll be talking about that. In the meantime, though, I just want to encourage everybody to, if you want to get up on all of the stuff like where I am going to be speaking or reading my books, I do that with libraries and stuff. You want some updates on some great information on raising kids. You get added content that you wouldn't get normally. Just sign up for our newsletter. And so if you go to the website, which is www.imperfectheroes.net, you'll be able to register. Or even if you just go to the podcast website, www.imperfectheroespodcast.com, then you can register for it there. So either one of those, you can register. It's free, and we go once a week, and you just get a ton of extra good information. So be sure and do that. All right, let's get going on our topic. Margot, it's so excited to have you. And we've talked a few times already and gotten to know each other nicely. And so let's talk for a little bit about, let's first start with, what you do. And you've just been so involved in entrepreneurship and with commissions and committees and all of that. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. And it's so fun to chat on this podcast with you, finally, after we talked so many times before.
I know.
It's great. So I was kind of a traditional person and spent most of my career working in international development and kind of, normal things. And then in 2008, my older son, Elliot, started an organization called Summit Series. He invited 18 young entrepreneurs to go skiing with him and thought it was going to be a one-off. And they all said, I want to do it again and bring 5 friends. And so this amazing organization was started. My husband and I just came back from Baja, where they had 1,200 super cool people at one of the events. And I've signed up for their event in Detroit in June. And they're, it's an amazing organization. And so starting in 2010, I started going to the events. I didn't want to go in the beginning when it was smaller, but by the time they had 1,000 people and John Legend and Bill Clinton and cool people like that speaking, I thought it's time for me to go. So, and I was so curious. We didn't know a lot of young entrepreneurs, and I was so curious. And I went up to all of them and I said, tell me, how did you turn out the way you did? So willing to work so hard on your idea to turn it into something real, to take on so much risk and work so single-mindedly. And they all basically told me the same thing. They all said, I had someone who believed in me, someone who told me I could do anything I put my mind to. Usually it was a family member. Even more usually it was their mom, but not always. Wasn't always a mom, wasn't even always a family member, usually. But I was so struck by this, and I just kept talking about it. And my kids said, you have to write a book. And I said, I can't write a book. And they said, no, you have to write a book. And I said, I can't write a book. And they said, you have to write a book. I'm like, okay, I'll write a book. So they actually wrote the foreword, and they said, everyone needs someone to believe in them. And sometimes that's even your kids.
Oh, I love that. How
Oh,
sweet.
I know. So I had no idea, if I went about it in a really serious way, what I would find. And I wanted a really diverse group, half men, half women, every race, every religion, every socioeconomic background, born overseas, born here, small towns, big cities, small families, big families, single moms, divorced, married, you name it. And to my amazement, they were basically all raised the same, which like just
Wow.
knocked my socks off. So then I wrote a book, and then I started talking to lots and lots of parent groups. And then 3 years ago, I decided I really needed to update it. And I started interviewing them all again and other people and added to them. And so I came up with a second edition 2 years ago. And I've just been talking to lots of people about it ever since. And now it's like my favorite topic. I'm like obsessed with it. There's so many unhappy kids in the world today.
Yeah,
So
there are.
many unhappy kids. And these are happy people. And anyhow, I don't want to keep babbling, but I can just talk about this for 30 minutes.
Yeah, for sure, which is about our goal. What I wanted to ask you is how did you find a commonality in how early these kids, when they were kids, were interested in starting their own business, their own thing?
Yeah, almost none of them were.
Ah,
5% maybe.
hmm,
Basically, none of, I mean, there were two of them who had lemonade stands. There were maybe five of them who were starting little businesses. Basically, none of them were doing that. That's not what they had in common. What they had in common is that every single one of them had a passion outside of school. And in
so
every
important.
case, eventually, maybe not right in the beginning, but in every case, eventually, the parents supported that passion.
Hmm.
And because they had this passion that they had discovered, they worked really hard at it. And because they worked really hard at it, they got really good at it. And because they got really good at it, they developed the confidence that if they worked hard at something, they could succeed. And they learned grit, and they learned focus, and they learned determination, and they learned resilience, and they learned about failure, and they learned how to pivot when things weren't going right. And they learned all these skills you need if you're going to become an entrepreneur. The vast majority of them were not passionate about the thing they ended up becoming an entrepreneur in.
Hmm.
So for me, I should tell you, I define an entrepreneur as anyone who starts something.
Okay.
So for me, an entrepreneur is not just someone who starts a for-profit business. It's someone who starts a nonprofit. It's someone
Right.
who starts a podcast. It's an artist. It's an activist. My younger son started a band. He's an entrepreneur, right? I mean,
Yeah.
he had to find other people to play in the band. He had to find a manager. He had to find a front of house, a back of house, all these different things that it takes to run a good band. Magic Giant, by the way, if you guys haven't listened, it's on
Oh,
Spotify and
fun.
it's wonderful. Magic Giant. But anyhow,
Fun.
he's an entrepreneur. So the people who became artists, actors, dancers, musicians, they pretty much found it when they were young. But none
Yeah.
of the others are doing anything with what their passion was when they were young. And maybe a third of them, it was sports. For my older son, it was
Mm.
tennis. And about a third, maybe more than a third of them were played sports into college. None of them does anything with sports professionally. But it's that
But there
same
are
thing.
lessons you learn through playing sports, being in a band, going to the neighbors and picking up dog poops for some money or whatever.
Absolutely.
There are lessons you learn that get you on that path.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, 100% DJ. I couldn't agree with you more. And they learned to compete, and they learned how much they enjoyed winning, and they learned
Yeah.
what to do if they didn't win. I don't know if you saw Roger Federer's commencement address at Dartmouth last year. You can see it on YouTube. It's fabulous. But among other things, he says to the kids, I won 80% of my matches. I won 80% of my matches, but I lost 50% of the points I played in matches.
Oh.
And he said, if you're focused on your mistakes and you spend all your time looking back, you're never going to move ahead. You're never going to go forward. And this is sort of a metaphor for life. Figure out what you did wrong, correct it, move on, keep
Yeah.
going. Resilience.
Some
Like
of the
everything.
entrepreneurs that I've talked with and associated with through my work, it's amazing to me how so many of them have said, I learned so much more from my failures than my successes. It's not a problem to fail if you learn from it and then move on. You don't keep making those same mistakes over and over again. And I think that resilience that you were mentioning earlier is saying, oh, okay, here, what's the next step then? And not getting all torn apart because you didn't win the game or the point or the match or whatever. But you look at it and you assess it. And if we can give our kids those skills, even early on, our kids, even when they're learning to walk, they learn to overcome failure, right? They
Right.
fall, they whatever, and we encourage them. Somehow we lose that as parents as they're getting older, of encouraging them through the failures and saying, oh, well, what did we learn from it? How can we move forward? And it's really not that big a deal to make a mistake or an error. The big deal is moving forward.
So I couldn't agree more. And it's one of the biggest things in the book. I've done a lot of research and it's also like been written about a lot. And parents who praise their children for success
Mm-hmm.
have kids who are afraid to take risks. Parents who punish their kids for failure have kids who are afraid to take risks. Parents who praise their kids for hard work and for effort have kids who work harder. And it's just so important for parents to understand, and every parent that raised a successful entrepreneur, none of them criticize their children for failure. It's like you're saying, what did you learn from this? What would you do differently next time?
Mm-hmm.
You think you could have done that might have changed the outcome? Do you think you did everything you could? Do you think you put in as much work as you needed to? What changes would you make? What do you think? And just get your kids to think about it, but not to punish them for failure, because if you're punished for failure, you grow up afraid to take risks. And if you're
Yeah.
afraid to take risks, you'll never become an entrepreneur because you're never going to achieve anything interesting if you're afraid to take risks.
Right. Well, and I wonder too, how many of the people that you talk to, this isn't their first business?
Right. Well, that's another thing. That's another reason I redid the book, because almost all of them were doing something else 7
How
years
funny.
later. Either they had sold their company or merged their company or whatever, or their company had gone in a different direction, or they had gone in a different direction or something. I mean, very few of them are sort of stagnant. And that's another thing I want to scream to parents, like, the path that we had when we were growing up, it's not there anymore.
Mm-mm.
This is not what kids want. They don't want to like graduate from college and then get a job and keep it for 40 years. And
Right.
these parents who look at their kids doing whatever it is the kids love and say, oh, don't waste your time on that. You need to focus on your schoolwork so you can get into a good college, so you can get into a good company and have a good job that'll make money. And I say to them, really, this is your goal for your child, that they would spend the next 40 years doing something they don't like?
Right.
That's your idea, that that's what your child's goals should be, that they take a job they don't like and keep it for 40 years? Doesn't
Yeah.
seem like a good goal to me.
Agreed. I think though too, as they grow and get older, they, at least this is my experience with my 5 kids, is they start out with, I want to do this, I want to do this. And then they go to college or they go to trade school or whatever. And it morphs and it's like, oh, that isn't what I thought it was going to be. Even for myself, I started out planning to teach high school. And I was good at it. I was really good at history and English and all of that. But as I got into it, I saw these holes that started developing when they were very young. I can do this, I can't do this, I'm good at math, I'm bad at math, all of these things. And so I even switched from high school into early childhood and wound up teaching kindergarten and running some preschools. But I think that it's okay too as kids grow and learn more about things that they find if you get them so geared into you have to be the doctor, you have to be this, you have to be that, and you go to school and you've invested all this money. It's just ridiculous. They're in debt for
Forever.
decades. Yeah. And so if they're that invested and they find out, oh, this isn't what I thought it was going to be, it's okay to switch and change, but let them be the key on that. It's not that I see parents who, well, my child's going to do this, my child's going to be that, my child's. And I think it's getting a little better than it used to, but still, we have these high goals. My child has to be a straight A student. Really? Do they? Because there's that saying, and maybe I don't know if you've heard this, that straight A students work for C students.
No,
Have you heard that one?
but I love it.
Yeah,
I
because straight A students, and bless their hearts, and I have a grandson, salutatorian, graduated with a 4.3 GPA. He's in college now, but he was also like the MVP for all athletics in his high school. He had this more well rounded experience. And I think, a lot of times those C students, they're having those more well rounded experiences rather than being so myopic
but the
in
point is,
their view.
it doesn't, it's different for every child, right?
Exactly,
If
it is.
you have a kid who's a great student and who loves studying science and loves all their science classes and gets A's in
Mm-hmm.
them, wants to be a doctor, hey, that's terrific. Terrific. Wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have a kid who doesn't like school, who's not happy, who's struggling, you have to deal with that. You can't try to force every child into being the same kind of person. And I mean, you mentioned kindergarten. I've got a grandchild who's in kindergarten, and
Yay!
and my son said, it's so amazing. Every one of these kids in his kindergarten class is so different. This one likes soccer. This one likes art. This one likes dancing. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
yes, hello, parents. Every child is different.
Right,
It's our job as parents to pay attention to who our child is and what our
yeah,
child's gift is and support that and nourish that and help them develop that, not try to push them all into the same cookie cutter. Let
right,
the one who soccer play soccer, let the one who loves dancing dance. And of course they can do other stuff. And of course, what they love will change over time. And all of that is okay. But just
right,
support the thing they love and let them know you're proud of them for their success in the thing they love.
right. Well, and I think too that if we're looking to teach, getting back to that moral development, to getting back to teaching work ethic, putting in the time, putting in the effort, reaching out and supporting someone else on your team that might be struggling with a skill and I'm really good at it. I can help that instead of beating down, judging, whatever, that kid that isn't doing as well as you or isn't as good as you at something, but they have something else that they bring to the team. And teaching our kids to be able to look at someone else and see what they bring to the table. So whether it's I'm a really good goalie or I'm a really good defensive right back or I forget what they're all called. But,
And market
every team
team.
needs different skills. And we see that in others and then we help them develop that skill. What an
Absolutely.
awesome thing to give our kids.
Absolutely. And every one of these entrepreneurs I talked to for my book, every one of them was raised by parents who really focused on kindness and compassion,
Mm,
which goes along with your whole moral development. And what I think is so interesting is when I talk to people who don't know anything about entrepreneurship, they all say, oh, people become entrepreneurs to make money. And I say, no, people go to Wall Street to make money. People become entrepreneurs because they want to make the world a better place.
yeah.
They find out, and maybe it's a product. I can make a better drink that, I can make a healthier drink. I can make a healthier makeup. I can make a dress that makes people feel better, or look
Mm-hmm.
better. I can develop a nonprofit that's going to help certain kinds of people. Whatever it is, it's because they want to help people. They want to do
Mm-hmm.
something better. They want to improve life, improve products, improve situations. And that's raised with compassion and kindness, wanting to do something that's better and that's bettering the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And being able to sit down and, I guess, look at your surroundings, look at where people are, and identifying the need that is there. I can identify, oh, this kiddo needs help with that. Or, oh, our neighbor across the street is really old and it's hard for him to bring in his garbage can. I can help with that. And so when you teach your kids to be able to look and assess what's going on around them, identifying a need, and then having that confidence in their ability to contribute something to make things better. It may not solve the whole problem. I can solve this part of the problem though. And so whether that's dealing with their siblings, their friends, their classroom at school, their team, maybe if they're on a team, wherever that is, when we can teach our kids that, that's a key skill just in life, let alone entrepreneurship.
Absolutely. I just agree completely. It's one of the best things parents can do is raise children with kindness and compassion and
Mm-hmm.
caring for others.
Yeah, yeah. And I think too with entrepreneurship too, there's that honesty level of when I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. That's going, if you don't have that down, you're not going to be successful in whatever business it is that you're trying to accomplish and achieve. Or if someone's paying me to do a service, I'm going to give them the very best service. I'm not going to do the bare minimum. I'm going to do the most. I was just talking to a guy. Oh gosh, it's probably been about 2, 3 weeks. And he has a home care business, a home health care business in the area. And we were talking, and he said, it's not, everyone talks about, you'll see commercials and stuff, we're the biggest in this area or whatever. And he says, my goal isn't to be the biggest, it's to be the best, to have the best people working with me, to give the best service. And I thought, that's someone I want to work with.
Absolutely. No, integrity. It's the most important thing. I used to tell my kids, if you lie 1% of the time, I can't trust you 100% of the time. And I remember my
Yeah.
dad telling me when I was, I think it was my very first job, and I was a teenager, and I said something like, I was bored today and I didn't do anything for like an hour. And he said, let me ask you a question. If you walked
Mm.
into their office and they had a cash register and it was open, would you just help yourself to $100? And I said, well, no. And he said, well, isn't that like taking money for a job and not working? I was like, oh,
Yes.
yikes.
And such a good philosophy, though. I'm so glad that your dad taught you that. And I'm sure that you pass that on to your kiddos as well. But let's look at our society that we're dealing with today and how many of them think it's, well, I'm bored. Well, I don't like this job. Well, I don't, so I'm not going to give it my 100%. And you're right. That is akin to stealing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's important for parents who were brought up in a different world to
Yeah.
learn that suddenly for the first time, like 20 years ago, we didn't know any young entrepreneurs. Today, when
Mm.
they do interviews, more than 50% of young people say they want to become an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just parents have to recognize this and can't keep pushing their kids to be something they're not or to do something that isn't going to make them happy. And the point is,
Mm-hmm.
they can try it. And if it doesn't work out, then they can go do something else. It's
Yeah.
not like you have to do it forever. I was talking at a group of parents, and afterwards, someone came up to me and said, my son started a little company in his dorm room, and I think what he's doing is stupid. But he just told us that he's not going back to college next year. He wants to move home and work on this company. And I'm so upset that I haven't talked to him in 3 weeks. And I saw somebody across the room who I knew hadn't graduated from college and had made a
Mm.
gazillion. And I called him over. I'm like, Craig, let me ask you a question. You have a choice of hiring two people. One person stayed in college, was a very average student, wasn't inspired by anything, but somehow graduated. The other student dropped out of college halfway through, tried to start a business, worked on it for a couple of years, decided that it wasn't really a good enough business and wants to get some better experience. Which kid do you want to hire? And without batting an eye, he said, I want to hire the second kid, and so do the other 150 parents in this room.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think too, with technology and the way that it's coming in, with the attitudes, so many people are working from home now. I mean, my husband works full time for an engineering firm. He hasn't been back to the office since they sent him home with COVID, but he's an introvert. He's a hard worker. And so when they were looking at him and he said, I'd really be interested in just working remotely. He's never missed a deadline. He's always been coming up with new ideas and different things, working well with other people. And they're like, absolutely, you can. The amount of freedom that is there. And I think more and more people all over the world, but also in the United States, are looking for, maybe they want to work from home, or maybe, even if they're working for another company, but getting the skills and the opportunity. Again, that goes back to work ethic. That goes back to giving an honest day's work for your pay. That means valuing deadlines and when they're supposed to come. And those are skills you take into entrepreneurship as well. But I think that the way society is changing, technology is changing, expectations are changing, that the attitudes about work that you and I grew up with, some of them are going to come in and work, but some of them are not. And so we need to be open to the changes that are taking place economically, technologically, all of those things, and be aware that our kids' world is not going to look very much like our world.
I agree. And it's so important for parents to understand you cannot make your child an entrepreneur. And you definitely cannot take a child who is not curious and send them to a 6-week entrepreneur camp and think they're going to become an entrepreneur. What you can do is make your child more entrepreneurial so that whatever they do in their life, they will have these skills. They'll be willing to take on challenges without credentials. They'll be willing to challenge the status quo. They'll be willing to work on something really hard and try different techniques and try different ways to make it succeed. They'll be willing to do all these really creative entrepreneurial things, even if they don't want to become an entrepreneur. Being an entrepreneur is everybody. Not that many people want to take on that much risk. Not that many people want to work around the clock. I'm not saying make your child an entrepreneur. I'm saying praise your child for effort, help your child become resilient and risk-taking, and raise a child that's compassionate and kind, and raise a child who likes to compete, and a child who likes to work hard, and all these wonderful skills. And maybe they'll become an entrepreneur, maybe they won't, but whatever they do in life, they'll be better at it. And happier.
I love that you brought up that having an entrepreneurial spirit does not mean being an entrepreneur.
Right. You can be a teacher. You can be a librarian. You can be, seriously, you can run a restaurant. I mean, whatever it is you're doing, if you think more creatively, if you think of different solutions to solve old problems, if you're willing to take on risks, if it seems like it's a worthwhile idea, if you get back up after you've been knocked down, if you don't view failure as failure, but you view it as how you learn and grow. I mean, all these things will make you better at whatever you do. And if you want to become an entrepreneur, that's fantastic. And if you don't, that's okay. That's fantastic too.
Exactly. Oh, I love everything that you're bringing. I wish we could talk a lot more. But Margot, if people want to know more about your speaking engagements and your book and all of the stuff that you provide, how would they get in touch with you?
So here's my book, and it's Raising an Entrepreneur, How to Help Your Children Achieve Their Dreams. And I have a website called raisinganentrepreneur.com. And you can contact me through the website, and it gives a list of all my articles and podcasts and fun stuff.
And of course, we're going to have all of that information down in the show notes. So if anybody listening is interested and wants to know more and learn more and maybe grab a copy of that amazing book, just go on down, click on the links, and it'll be right there. So thank you very much. Margot, before we go, I always ask my guests the same question. And so I want to ask you, we know there are no perfect parents. They don't exist. And so some do seem to be maybe more successful, though, than others. What would you consider a successful parent?
So that's what my book is about. Buy
the book.
My book. It's how to help your children achieve their dreams. It's realizing that every child, and this is what I said before, every child is born with a gift. And our job as a parent is to help them figure what that is, and then to nurture it and support it and tell them how proud we are for how hard they're working in the thing that they love, and to raise them with kindness and to raise them with compassion. And, they'll be fine.
Yeah, they will. They will. And I love, when you said earlier that all of these people had someone who believed in them. And, and there's that saying, and I don't know who originated, I've heard so many different people being attributed the same, but basically that every child just needs one person who believes in them. And so whether you're a parent or not, you can always be that person to a child. And I love that. So Margot, thank you so much for being part of our Imperfect Heroes family and part of our story and contributing. I know that anyone listening is going to get so much from our conversation and your ideas. And so everyone, if you like what you heard, go ahead, feel free, in fact, feel a little obligated to leave a 5-star review. 5 is the appropriate number of stars, and even a review. And you can always ask questions or get a hold of us on Instagram and Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Truth Social. I'm on all kinds of things, but just look for Imperfect Heroes and you'll find us. And so everyone, we'll be back again next week with another great guest and some more important and fun ideas on raising our kids and making them successful and happy and contributing. And so until next week, let's find joy in parenting. See you guys. Thank you so much for sticking around to the end of today's episode of Imperfect Heroes. Parenting is truly one of the most rewarding journeys we can take. But let's face it, it can be incredibly challenging, and sometimes we make it harder on ourselves than it needs to be. The good news is that with a little bit of work up front, there are practical steps you can take to bring more peace and joy into your family life. I am passionate to share these strategies and insights with you. If you're ready to step on the path to joyful, effective parenting, I invite you to schedule a family checkup. Just click on the calendar link in the show notes below, schedule a time that works perfectly for you, and let's work together to create a more harmonious and happy environment. And remember, every small step that you take today makes a big difference. So thank you again for joining us, and until next time, let's find joy in parenting.